We did this for the first time on Tuesday. We're trying to improve everything, including the users' use of the technology, as well as the presentation itself. We'll be doing this every Tuesday and Thursday from now until whenever, and at the same time at 4:30. You can, after the class is over today, you will be emailed a link to a recording of this session from Meg. So you can watch out for that, and if it occurs to you that you'd like to see some or all of it again, it gives you the opportunity to do that. And that link will be up, will be active for 7 days. And as far as the session goes, I'm going to talk a little bit at the beginning. First time around, I did a lot of talking to sort of explain the background of mindfulness in particular and what it is. We'll do a little less today, but the topic today is physiology and the hub of the wheel, and we'll learn what that is in a little bit. But I'm going to increase my technological prowess here, I hope, by throwing up a PowerPoint for just a couple of minutes to sort of walk through first steps here. So assuming this all goes well, I will. Come on, there it goes. All right, and just need to get rid of this. Bear with me for a second. Well, it's not working perfectly, but this will do if I can't get it to respond perfectly. So this is the physiology associated with meditation, and in particular mindfulness meditation, is growing in terms of its sort of scope and the depth of the research that's being done in the Western world. These are practices that come from the Eastern world and come from literally thousands of years ago. In the yoga community, we know that it goes back a couple of thousand years ago, and Buddhism now is well over 1,000 years old. So this is nothing new to them. What has happened, particularly in the past probably 20 or 25 years, is that a lot more time and money has been poured into research, all of which points to the fact that everybody should be meditating. And we'll talk a little bit about how that reflects in a second here. I will just say that if it isn't already evident to you, we are incredibly complex human beings. Our physiology, our brains are very complex, and there is a whole lot that we don't know at this point about how we work. But of what we do know, we're able to come to some conclusions about how meditation works with the brain. And so that's what we'll just touch on a little bit here. And forgive me because I'm not Western trained in medicine. I have a certification as a yoga therapist, and that's about as close as I come. But I do know enough to at least be dangerous, and so let me be a little dangerous here. So what we know, first of all, is that we are creatures of habit, and that the limbic brain is the portion of the brain that's the most primitive. Essentially, we share it in common with alligators. So this was the early formation that goes back several million years. And that is the portion of the brain that governs our survival instincts and responds to a threat or perceived threat. Within the amygdala brain, or within the limbic brain, is a little pea-sized thing called the amygdala, which is sort of the control center. And it is responsible for regulating the fight, flight response. And it also is responsible for determining what memories will be kept or deleted or eliminated, and where they go in terms of where they're stored. So it has some other functions as well, but these are two of the very important ones when it comes to a discussion of meditation. Limbic system is responsible for, I found this an interesting word, fear, or interesting phrase, fear conditioning. So we are conditioned to be afraid. So no wonder we have times where we feel a significant amount of stress or anxiety. So within this little pea-shaped thing called the amygdala, there is control over the autonomic portion of our nervous system, which regulates a whole ton of things, but it includes heart rate, it includes the release of epinephrine, or there's another word for it, but epinephrine, which will kick into place when we experience a sudden fright. It governs our emotional responses, hormonal secretions of all kinds, and has determinations as far as memory goes, as I mentioned before. So this little thing called the amygdala has a big role to play in our day-to-day functioning. So what happens in meditation, as has been now determined or well established in the Western world, this thing called the amygdala actually reduces in size. It shrinks. In addition, the hippocampus becomes more dense, and the hippocampus, among other things, is responsible for emotional regulation, as well as the organization of our long and short-term memory. And the temporal parietal juncture is an area of the brain that is responsible for creativity and for empathy is the other one. And both of those creatures, the hippocampus and the TPJ, are shown to increase and grow denser as a result of meditation. This was demonstrated actually in one study that was 8 weeks long, where meditators were asked to do 20 to 30 minutes of meditation a day. So clearly it doesn't take long for these changes to start to occur, which I think is incredibly encouraging to know that if you determine that you're going to make meditation a part of your life, it's not going to be the kind of proposition where you can't expect to see any results for, months or years or decades. The frontal lobes of the brain found in meditators are also affected, and they're preserved is the word I found most common. And what this really means is that as we age, we don't lose executive functioning as quickly as one might if one didn't meditate. So if there is no other reason to meditate, to preserve your own brain power over the long term might be enough motivation. So I'm just going to review real quickly what we talked about last week, and then we'll get right to a practice. Mindfulness is a particular segment of the meditation community, of which there are many. It is derived primarily from the Buddhist community, and in the West has been championed by a particular guy named Jon Kabat-Zinn. Although it's become so sort of popularized over the past 10 or 15 years that there are a number of sort of famed practitioners and teachers of this particular style of meditation. It works because it's accessible for most people, and it's not too painful, and it provides fairly rapid results. So in fact, the exercise we're going to go through today with the hub of the wheel hopefully will be a demonstration of some of the power of this particular form of practice. So this is a quote from the king, Jon Kabat-Zinn. He would be horrified if he heard me say that he was the king. But anyway, mindfulness means paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So that is the definition of mindfulness. All right, so let me make one adjustment here. And all right, so you may be familiar with the term Teflon for pleasure, Velcro for pain. And that's a term that's applied to the functioning of our psyche. So we tend to remember the good things, the pleasant things, the things for which we might be thankful on a much lesser scale than those things which bring us to some state of fear, of stress, maybe even of depression. So what we're asked to do, charged to do in this particular practice of meditation is to sort of adjust this balance so that the pain portion of our experience becomes lessened and the pleasure portion of our experience rises to the surface. So that's sort of, in a general sense, our goal. I often describe this in terms of creating space. And on Tuesday, I quoted Viktor Frankl. I'll quote him again. I love this quote. It says, "Between the stimulus and the response, there is a space. It is in this space that we find our power and our freedom." And the space which he speaks of here is the space that we can create by starting to lessen the fear-based portion of our functioning and allowing something to creep in that amounts to an ability to discern a little bit more clearly what it is we're going through, why we're responding to it, what it is we're responding to, why it is we're responding to it, and then ultimately to make some changes in our own patterns of thought, behavior, and feeling that can give us a much more pleasant, much more integrated experience of life. And this isn't hyperbole. This is well demonstrated by anybody who spends a significant amount of time over a period of weeks or months meditating. And so if you've never done this before, if your experience has been a little weak on the meditation front, then I would just ask that you keep an open mind to this and just, take this opportunity to participate in the experience. Let's see. There we go. All right. So we're going to do a meditation now that is often called coming back to the hub. And so we're describing here the hub of a wheel. And what you might think of this as being is that if the sense of being present, being in the moment, being relaxed, being at peace, if that is equal to the hub, and the spokes then of the wheel are the distractions. So it is, to put it in a very contemporary context, it is the stock report that we heard of, and I don't know what the stock market is doing, so don't use this as a reason to go and look, but if the stock market goes down some significant amount, as it has done in recent days, it's considered to be a spoke of the wheel, which takes us out to the periphery and away from this sort of center of peace, this center of space, this center of being grounded. And if the response that we have is significant enough, then it sort of gets caught in the periphery and goes around and around in circles in the wheel, and it never really makes any progress. It just continues to be, least case, an irritation, most case, something that truly can affect our well-being because we're so sort of wound up in the goings-on of the moment or the news or the situation. So what we're trying to do in meditation in this respect is to come away from the hub, or to come back to the hub rather, and to allow those spokes to turn around the hub with an increasing ability to pay less and less attention to them. So this is part of the function of mindfulness. So I would ask you now to find yourself a comfortable seated position. And if you happen to be in a chair, to place your feet flat on the floor and uncross knees or ankles so that you have some full contact between the surface of your shoes or your feet with the floor. And then go ahead and close your eyes. And then if you would join me in taking a few full breaths. So take a nice full inhale and a big exhale. Do that 2 more times. Big inhale. Huge exhale. And once more. Good. And relax your breath. Soften the features of your face. Sense any tension you might experience in your shoulders or neck, hands or arms, chest, belly, hips, legs, feet. Take in, if you can, to your field of awareness, this entire person, this entire body of its existence. And if that doesn't work for you, focus just on the hands for the moment. So one of the things that we did last time and will continue to do is work with this concept, which we call anchoring. And anchoring is a process where we find something to focus our attention on. And then as our attention leaves, as it inevitably will, we use this anchor for something to come back to again and again and again. So for the three primary anchors that are used in this particular practice, we offer sound, the breath, or sensation. And so we're going to spend just a little bit on each of these. And the ask here is that you choose one of them to serve for today, for this practice, as your anchor. And as and if you practice in the future, you're more than welcome to use a different anchor in each practice. Sometimes one will work well for a day or for weeks or even months. And then sometimes that particular anchor will cease to serve us. And so that's why it's good to have a bit of a repertoire. So we'll start with sound. And so as you settle in, soften your eyes and bring your attention to your ears. And in fact, can you sense your inner ears? And notice whatever sound is entering into your ears right now. And as you pay attention to that, try and do so in a relaxed manner such that you're not trying to examine it, come to a conclusion, analyze. You're just here experiencing sound. And as you do, you might notice that there are some sounds that are continuous, and there are other sounds to which there is a beginning and an end. I might encourage you to feel grateful for a moment at our ability to experience sound. And then bring your attention to your breath. The breath can be represented at the nostrils, in your nose, through the throat, at the chest, at the belly, any place where you feel that the manifestation of the breath is something that you can set your mind upon for a few moments. So now just pay attention to the breath. And allow this experience to be free such that it isn't subject to analysis, consideration, ideas. It's as if you're a camcorder, objectively recording the experience without assigning anything to it. And then I'd ask you to shift your awareness again and bring it to the sensations in your hands and fingers. And as you do, you might notice anything that your hands or fingers are touching. You might be aware of the space between your fingers and thumbs. You might feel heat. Or even the subtle sensations of buzzing or tingling. So this then, any of these anchors can be our vehicle with which to enter the hub, to sit in the moment, to be relieved of our own mind's chatter and whatever else is going on in the world. So now I'm going to guide a little meditation to work with this hub of the wheel with an urging to come back to the hub again and again. So allow your eyes to remain closed. And through sound, breath, or sensation, come to the hub, come to presence. And then if you would, bring up into your awareness a situation which you find challenging, one that brings up a difficult reaction. Nothing traumatic, and it doesn't have to be the best or the greatest, just something we can work with here today. A situation that you find challenging, one that brings up a difficult reaction. It might be fear, anxiety, frustration, anger, embarrassment. Find that situation. And then we're going to do a little bit of visualization here. And if this is a new thing to you, sometimes in the early going, it's a little bit harder to conjure up, but just do the best that you can. Would you take this situation that you've identified and, like it's unrolling on a film reel, can you watch it occurring? See it starting to unfold from its beginnings. What happens? And then what is your response to what happens? And when you're at the point where the emotion comes up, just pause the frame for a second. So anger, resentment, guilt. Now, as you pause here, take a look at your attitude. Examine how it is that you're relating to this situation. What do you find in your reaction that you could identify as being habitual? In other words, if the situation came up 6 months ago, or if it were to come up 6 months into the future, your response would be the same. What is your habitual way of regarding the situation? What is it that you identify as being wrong? And then still immersed in this playing out of the situation, can you say no to that experience? So in other words, if it's anger, can you say no to the anger? Can you mentally whisper the word no? And notice what happens. Notice how that feels. When you say no to your reaction, what happens in your body? As you resist the experience by saying no, what happens in your mind? What's your heart like when you say no? And imagine for a moment that whenever this situation occurs, you have the ability to resist it, to say no. Imagine saying yes to your no. Now, come back to the visualization again and be at that place in the situation where you have your habitual reaction. And try again to feel the feelings, the annoyance, the fear, the hurt. And this time, instead of saying no, say yes. Say yes to the experience. As you perceive the situation or the response in your mind, in your heart, in your body, just say yes. What happens in your body when you allow rather than deny? What happens in your mind? Imagine how it would be that if each time this situation came up, instead of saying no, you said yes. You allowed it to occur. You recognize your response and you allow it without judgment, without analysis, just allowing it to be. The psychotherapist and meditator Dorothy Hunt said, "Do you think peace will come some other place than now? In some other time than now? In some other heart than yours?" Peace is in this moment without judgment. That is all. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. As we start to recognize and allow our own adverse reactions to circumstances, we begin to open up a world where we have permission to come back to the hub, to come back to that place of peace, of centering. Would you again come back to your anchor? And for a few moments, rest on the sound, or the breath, or the sensation. This is the retraining of the mind that starts to create this space so that our reactions and our responses to those reactions don't have to occur based on our own established patterns. I invite you until our meeting next Tuesday to spend 5 to 10 minutes focusing on your anchor. And as something comes up, whether it's a random thought or it's something more substantial like a fear or anger or depression, to simply use that as a moment to allow, to say yes. And then once again, come back to your anchor, rest in it until the next occurs. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll look forward to seeing you again. Please feel free to take advantage of all the classes that Yoga One is offering throughout the week, and keep up the faith. We'll get through this.